Good morning. I forgot to give y'all another piece of information because we ended up staying in Beaufort. I ended up touring, browsing a few of the auction houses I'm familiar with in South Carolina. And the one that I uploaded for you yesterday, they had authentic, well, some of the last you're going to see authentic Gullah Geechee art pieces in a book about the artwork and historic significance of Gullah art, not just on the coast of South Carolina and Georgia, but also globally and what it has impacted over the years. So I always think of Gullah art, Geechee art. I really don't like saying Gullah. Let me put that out there. I prefer to say what we are, and we are Geechees. The Geechee art was the original coastal art before people started focusing on the seashells, the wildlife and fish and all of that. The original coastal art depicted the Geechee life and culture, traditional norms, families, all of it. That was considered the first coastal artwork. And so that auction house had some pieces for less than $20, and they're not prints. They're not prints. It's actual artwork. So that's why I was telling you guys to run that walk. These are extraordinarily low priced, and I know why. Most people who visit that auction house, uh, they're not Geechees. So when you see things like on there as well, they had an actual uh, Geechee working doll. I'll put it that way. A doll that could be used for different spiritual practices. They had one on there. It was $5. Even though it's handmade, it has beading on it. It has very distinct features that indicate what it's for. And it's on there for $5, right? Whereas a someone who may ascribe to the old art of spirituality on the coast, west east coast, excuse me, coastal communities, um, they would want to get their hands on that piece, and it's only $5. They would want to get their hands on it because for their beliefs and practices, it's very significant because it is old. It's not a new one. It's not manufactured. It was handmade. And someone who they would consider like a practitioner, they would want that piece. So not only that, if you saw the movie Midnight in the Garden of Evil, Good and Evil, excuse me, there was a woman on there, and I think her name was something. I forgot what it was, but Minerva. They called her Minerva. Minerva was an actual woman that existed, and the person who played her, you know, I just leave that alone. But she was an actual woman from the Low Country. She was a Geechee also, the Low Country of South Carolina, and she was there. The infamous Dr. Buzzard, who existed, and his name and moniker was passed on after his death to his son, from his son to his grandson. And after then, no one's heard anything else about Dr. Buzzard's lineage. And he was also a Geechee. So what I'm saying to you is that the way I know it's authentic and handmade is because where they're at, that's where they make them. And whoever made that one, either they're not living anymore or the person who purchased it, they never used it. So with that said, it's sitting on there for $5. No one blinking, nothing, nothing, right? Because the people who use that auction house They're not Geechee or black people. They don't care nothing about stuff like that. They don't care nothing about the Geechee art. They don't care nothing about the spirituality part. They're not even wise enough to know maybe you shouldn't be touching that, you know? Or maybe saying, once you see it, knowing I need to get in touch with somebody who can remove it because you're not supposed to touch that stuff. I know that all too well. I know I told you about Aunt Rachel. If I didn't, I'd tell you this. Aunt Rachel was in her 90s when she came to live with us. She didn't have a husband. She had five husbands. All of them died before she did. And, she lived by herself. She owned her own property, several acres of land. And, she was just lived by herself, took care of her nephew the best way she could. Anyway, he was grown and gone at that time. But anyway, so well, yeah, he was dead by then. Yeah, he died. Mysterious death. It was weird. But anyway, so Aunt Rachel came to live with us once she got advanced in age and she couldn't live alone anymore. So my mom, and we were taking care of her. She was just living with us. Well, you see, Aunt Rachel's house, without anybody telling me, I knew she was doing something she ain't had no business in there doing, or something wasn't right because if you sat on her couch to my right, there was a room and it had a table in there and it had a chair on one side and a chair on the other side, and the window would be in the middle. And I recall distinctly because I used to go over there after school sometimes before she got older. And I asked her, "What is that room for? Can I go in there and play in that room?" She said, "No, that's my reading room. Don't you go in there, gal." That was it. And I didn't know what that meant until I got grown. And then I started putting the pieces together. Right. Anyway, so Aunt Rachel's house was pretty odd. It was red and white. It was white, but she had everything trimmed in red. Everything trimmed in red. But anyway, so when she came to live with us, we brought her to the house, and then my parents and my uncle went back to her house to clear the house out so nobody would feel like they can come in there and steal anything of hers. She had all these 1800s porcelain white dogs on the couch, and she wouldn't let you touch them, move them, or anything. And I just knew then, like, my brain was like, that something ain't right about them dolls. But anyway, they left me at the house while they were taking the first haul, right? They were taking it to the city dump. So I'm there and I end up leaning my hand up against a wall and the wall moved. Like it rocked back on itself. And I could see through the crack. It was a light in there. There was a light in there. So I pushed it back more. And from floor to ceiling, there were canned goods. I'm talking about from World War I or two. I mean, these weren't normal canned goods. I mean, they were rusty, they were old, and they would just fill all the way to the ceiling. And then when you look down in the corner to my right, I started seeing some strange stuff. And it was all together. It was, different. I mean, different objects, things. It was a liquid bottle that had something in it that looked like it, I don't know. It looked like a piece of form, a part of a human or a some kind of animal or something. It was in a glass jar, and then it was all these. It looked like dried up blood and stuff. It was weird, y'all. It was weird, y'all. And so I got scared and I ran out the house. I sat outside of the house until my parents and my uncle came back. And I told them, I said, I need to show y'all something. I saw something. I found something. And they brought back a man with them, and his name was Mr. Skeetybo. Mr. Skeetybo. And so Mr. Skeetybo was supposed to have been helping with moving the stuff out of the house too. And so my mom looked and she said, "My God, what is this?" And then Mr. Skeetybo said, "You know what the hell that is? You know what that is. I'm getting the hell out of here." That's what Mr. Skeetybo said. And anyway, my dad was like, "We can't touch that. You have to have somebody come in here and touch that. We cannot touch that." Mr. Skeetybo wouldn't come back in the house, and he didn't. He discontinued all of his assistants at that time. Anyway, so they moved everything out. Turns to find out what was in those cans were rolls on rolls on rolls on rolls on rolls of money from floor to ceiling. Those cans were dummy cans. What she did was she opened them at the bottom, stuffed money in them, and set them on the shelf. Like they were just canned goods. They were not canned goods. That was her money, right? That was her money in the house. But she also had, money in the bank. Anyway, so she at the house, they clearing everything out. So some time go by. My parents go ahead and, you know, uh, check in with her attorney and stuff, and it's trying to sort stuff out and make sure her estate is okay and nothing happened to it. So my mom has a background in law. So my mom started doing her own investigation while she was at work, and she realized her Aunt Rachel's lawyer was stealing from her, and he stole a lot from her, a lot of money. And mom came home from work, and you have the living room, and then you can look straight into the dining room in our house. I'm on the couch. Rachel is on the couch next to me, and I'm just sitting there watching TV. But my mom is yelling. She is fussing. She is irate. She is upset that somebody's been, she said the lawyer done been stealing Aunt Rachel money. How many years he been stealing from her, and she didn't know. And I mean, she was spazzing out. And so I looked over at Aunt Rachel thinking she didn't know what they were talking about. And her eyes narrowed the more my mom started talking, and she knew exactly what mama was talking about. And so Aunt Rachel said, "I'ma fix him." And Aunt Rachel got up and she shuffled down the hall to her room and closed the door. Yeah, that was just it. She went in that room, she closed the door, and she didn't come out back out for the night. So when I went down that hall to check on her before I went to sleep, and I whispered in and said, "Aunt Rachel, you all right?" She shuffled through the door and she looked at me and she said, "Close this door, child." And her face, it didn't look right, y'all. I can't describe it, but it didn't look like her normal face. That's all I can say. So I closed the door. Next morning, I opened the door. I didn't, knock or anything. I just opened the door and said, "Come on, Aunt Rachel, it's time for you to have breakfast." She came out and she looked so refreshed and well rested and perky. Like last night didn't even happen. And she just shuffled along and she did her little hip bump she liked to do with me, playing with me. She shuffled along. She sat right there at that table, ate them grits, bacon, and whatever else I had made for her that morning. And she just eating her food and she tapping her foot and humming. And I'm like, okay, well, some time go by. I wouldn't even say it was 3 months, y'all. It couldn't have been 3 months. We ran into Mr. Edwards, which was Aunt Rachel's lawyer, right? We were down there walking around Elmwood Park, my mom and I, at night. We hadn't drove over there. We wanted to just walk around there and stuff at night, do an evening walk. We run into Miss Edwards and Miss Edwards. And uh, he's standing there and it looks like there's something protruding from his side that got to be like the size of a bowling ball. That's how big and prominent it was, because he was a man, small, slender build. So something sticking out on this side is sticking out. You can see it. And so Mrs. Edwards say, well, he's been diagnosed with some kind of tumor and cancer, and doctor's trying to figure out what's going on. And the first thing came to mind for me, Aunt Rachel. What Aunt Rachel said. She said, I'ma fix him. Now, I don't know, I can't prove it, but I think Aunt Rachel did that to him. Because they kept saying they didn't know what it was. He wasn't a smoker, he wasn't a drug abuser, and all of this stuff. So they couldn't figure out, the doctors couldn't figure out what this was growing out of, I'm sorry, growing out of this man's side, growing out of this man's gut. They couldn't figure it out. They just said it's a tumor. It looked cancerous. They don't know what kind of tumor it is, but based on their test, it was cancerous. And I believe to this very day, Rachel did that to him, because when someone says that they're going to fix you, it is the equivalent of someone saying that they are going to hex you. So instead of saying, I'm going to hex you, they always said, I'm going to fix you. So, hear people say stuff like, I'm going to fix your behind, I'm going to fix you. They have no idea that they're saying that they're going to curse somebody. But back to what I was saying. So being that I observed different things, figured out certain things about my Aunt Rachel over time, I realized that she was a practitioner. Those were her beliefs. You know, and I got to give it to her. She didn't mix the two together. Aunt Rachel didn't go to church. Did you hear what I just said? Aunt Rachel she didn't go to church. So she wasn't one of those practitioners who they went to church in practice. Aunt Rachel made a clean cut that this is what I do, this is what I believe, this is what I get into. But she never had any children. She never had any children. All of her husbands, all five of them, just mysteriously died. And because of that, that left her to be a very wealthy woman, because she married pretty well to do men, and because of that, everything she has it came from them, and this too, was a moneymaker back in those days. You gotta remember she was born in the 1800s, so that was a big market. Um, as a matter of fact, where do you think Cracker Jacks came from? Aha, people don't know that neither. Cracker Jacks started because that was an actual practice. Black people would pay money for a box after going to a practitioner, stick their hands in it. Whatever they get was meant for them. It was good luck for them or whatever. It was a massive business that was started by one of Dr. Buzzard's proteges that ended up moving to New York during the Great Migration. Um, and then that turned into someone deciding to make this for kids. So, yeah, yeah. And the way they concealed what they were doing with the black people time was calling it Cracker Jacks. They were referring to white people as crackers, and they jacks, like jacks you throw on the ground and pick them up by one, pick them up by two, that game. So that's a little brief history on that. So what I'm getting to is you don't supposed to touch that stuff. I would never do it. I I don't care. The only person we knew of who actually called themselves trying to dismantle the whatever that was on the down there in that hidden closet. He ended up living with a bizarre rash all over his body, and he lost his mind. You don't go touching stuff. You get what I'm saying? If you don't know what you're touching, you don't know what you're doing. You don't touch stuff like that. Before I forget, please watch. I'm not into scary movies, and I didn't know this was a scary movie until I started watching it. But the whole time I was watching this movie, I knew how to put this. It was certain things that were said and done in that movie that I knew you would only know about. It was if you have actually witnessed this stuff, experienced this stuff, had to do some of these things to help somebody, right? In the name of the movie, it is called Deliverance. Now, um, I don't care what nobody say. I think that Basquiat boy who made that art, he's died and all of that, and Jay-Z did his hair like him and stuff. I really believe the first time I saw his artwork, those are I don't care what nobody says. Within his work, it's a very dark, heavy, malevolent entity in feeling in everything available, that's making itself apparent, not just visually, but spiritually. You can feel it. Something in that artwork, it isn't right. It isn't right. Now, I think it's interesting that Lee Daniels slid one of those pieces of art like into the movie, but the movie is about a child who has been attached by something dark. Now, the thing is, the whole time I was watching that movie, I kept asking, how did he know this? Who told him? Who showed him? I wonder where he went to church at. Was he apostolic? Was he Pentecostal? I kept asking myself these questions because he knew he placed too much information in that movie for it to not be true. Honey, I found out at the end of the darn movie, the movie was based on an actual black family. It was so severe that they had to tear that house down. And still, after tearing it down, whatever it is, it's still dominant, in that community or on that street. And people talk about how much weird things take. You'll see the picture of the actual family on Deliverance. I don't know why this movie wasn't placed on the silver screen and it was just contained to Netflix. But it was, I mean, this is a gripping story, not just about the elements of what happened to this child, but also the elements of what happens to a family when there's breakdown, stressors, addictions, multi-generational parenting, poverty, all of it. It's a lot to watch, but it's the main thing that stuck out for me was two things they kept referencing over and over and over and over again. It was the smell of death, the smell of sulfur, and the flies. The flies don't go anywhere, can't get rid of them. And I don't know if you all realize it, but that that darn plague in Egypt is real because that is where they call it. I mean, the Lord of the Flies had come from there, and the Lord of the Flies is an actual being entity that you can read about his actual name. I'm not saying it, right? And so I knew about the smell of death, and it sounds weird, but you can smell death on somebody. You can. There's really no easy way to avoid that distinct smell, but I don't think it's like sensory smell. I think it's spiritually you're able to pick up on it, and it does have a distinct smell. On the other hand, if it smells like sulfur or something rotting or something, um, yeah, that's the only thing. It just smells like something decomposing. It smells like sulfur. um, that's when you know somebody has a severe, dangerous demonic attachment that they are gone at that point. Like anytime you can expect to see their eyes turn black. And I've seen that. Yeah, I can be honest with you. I've only seen that with one person. And at this time, what happened to them or that attachment is still there so bad that it torments them to the point they can't be sober for 30 minutes at all. They're not able to be sober for any reason at any time because they're being tormented and they won't go through the deliverance process. They're being severely tormented because they have that attachment. But what I'm saying to you is watch the movie Deliverance. There's a component in there that I was shocked to see was that of the evangelist who explained to her, we don't do exorcisms. We do deliverance, and the difference between what Catholics believe and what the evangelist actually performed and believed and said. Um, as far as Monique was in the movie, um, her portion of the film has been documented. The caseworker actually stated what she saw, what she knew, and that all of this stuff was real. This lady is not making this stuff up. She actually helped her too. I mean, this is a real life film. So if you haven't um, watched it yet, please do. I highly doubt that there will ever be a documentary about this film. I don't think that ever happened because I'm 99.99% sure they don't want to go saying anything, doing anything that will evoke anything because of what they endured. And it was real. And as like I said, that Basquiat picture, I know for a fact Lee Daniels stuck that there because he knows that it is truly associated with the demonic. He knows it. And that's why he stuck it. Nobody can tell me that boy wasn't tormented and that led to what happened to him because of whatever attachment, he had, and yeah, when I don't see how nobody look at that boy work and not see that or feel that. I'm serious. And I find it strange that see, celebrities show stuff to people so they can start sticking it in their house. Not all of a sudden everybody. I got me a Basquiat. I got me a Basquiat. I got one in my house. The devil is a lie. I don't have enough oil. I don't have enough. I don't have enough nothing to put that in my house at any time. If somebody handed me any art like that, I would set it on fire in front of them because something's attached to that piece of work. And like I said, it's death, it's agony, it's dark, it's I can't describe it. All I know is that's how I describe it. Okay, okay, all right. I'm gonna hop off of here. And then I'll come back probably sometime this week to tell you about the conversation we had about um, that led from single parenting in the church and the modern the trap that's been going on all along that we have not been noticing about what's happening to those young women. A lot of those guys see them girls on an upswing, getting themselves together, getting promotions, getting a lot of visibility for their hard work ethic. And a lot of these guys lead them along to believe that they're going to have something, whatever. And what he's trying to do is stop her dead in her tracks. And they know the easiest way to do that is get her pregnant. because now her focus shifts to the child, and then he run off. You get what I'm saying? It was a whole setup, to sabotage her career, sabotage her ability to have a good mate or find a husband. It's done deliberately to sabotage their lives. And I don't think we did a good job of teaching that to our young women. I know this man did not come mow the lawn today knowing good and god darn well